Extraordinary and stunning, unique and recognizable, emphasizing the status and character of its owner. Stylish and grandiose, sporty and comfortable, all these words can be used to describe cars of this brand. Hello, friends. I have told you stories about globally renowned automotive companies several times before, and there are plenty of their videos on the channel. Today, I'll share another one. After all, it's nearly impossible to walk down the street and not notice cars of this brand, no matter how you look at it. The history of the Porsche brand is fascinating and rich. Firstly, it was established in post-war Germany, which was barely recovering. Secondly, its creation took place at a time when other prestigious brands had not only won over their consumers, but had confidently taken over all niches of the automotive market. Yet, despite those uncertain times, Porsche not only survived and stayed afloat, but also earned the title of one of the most prestigious, popular, and desired car brands. Of course, many years have passed since then, and today, many say that Porsche is a car with genuine charisma. But here's the question, was it always like this? And why is Porsche, well, Porsche? In general, sit back comfortably and listen carefully. As is often the case, a company wouldn't have a history if it weren't preceded by the story of its founder. It all began on September 3, 1875, when a boy named Ferdinand was born into a family of a coppersmith in the small town of Maffersdorf in the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, now Czech Republic. As for the hero's family, it cannot be said that the Porsches were wealthy, but they were not destitute either. Ferdinand's father, Anton Porsche, owned a repair workshop and, being a skilled tinsmith, was highly respected by the local residents and even elected as the head of his town. Ferdinand had an older brother and an older sister, and as usual, the father planned to make his eldest son the heir. However, as a preview, I'll mention that the older son died in a tragic accident while working as an apprentice in his father's workshop. After this, Ferdinand became the elder son and heir, and the parents had to put a lot of effort into raising him as a worthy person. While the father worked in the workshop, the mother took care of raising the son. The first literacy lessons were taught by the future car designer's mother. When the boy turned 12, his father started taking him to the workshop, and Ferdinand, who had never been to school, eagerly helped his father with the work. Although it was still challenging for him, it didn't stop the young boy from immersing himself in various technologies related to electricity. For years later, the boy attended a general evening school in a neighboring town, commuting on a bicycle after a full day's work in his father's workshop. Despite all the difficulties, Ferdinand excelled in school. In fact, his school years passed between his father's workshop and the school, 10 kilometers away from home. It's worth mentioning that all of this benefited him. At the age of 15, the young man assembled his first generator, connected a light bulb to it, and later powered an entire house where he lived. In this way, the Porsche house became the second in the town to have electricity. The young man gained a good reputation as someone with hands and a head on his shoulders. When he turned 18, he left his home and headed to Vienna. That's where his adult and independent life began. With the money he had saved over the years of working in his father's workshop, Ferdinand rented a small attic on the outskirts of Vienna and actively started looking for a new job. While scanning the ads in the local newspaper, he came across a job opening at the Lohner factory. Despite lacking a higher education and having only completed the 4th grade of school, the young man found himself at the doorstep of a factory that was already producing locomotives and even electric cars. 36-year-old Ludwig Lohner initially laughed when he heard the young provincial's desire to work at his factory, not just as any employee but as a designer. However, upon seeing recommendation letters from the city authorities, he couldn't believe his eyes. Before him stood an 18-year-old with no formal education, yet someone who managed to electrify his own house and even the town hall of his small town. In a risky move, Ludwig decided to hire Ferdinand, but with one condition: Porsche had to obtain a diploma. While working at the factory, Ferdinand had to enroll in a correspondence course at the Imperial Technical University. Simultaneously, he worked in production, learning all the intricacies of the trade. As you may have already guessed, Ferdinand was no ordinary guy. He was always drawn to inventing, and the turning point in his biography came in the year 1897. In that year, the young engineer, in his free time from work, constructed his first step-by-step engine. He revealed his next project in 1898, an electric traction car without a transmission. The car stood out for its small size and high speed for that time, a whopping 40 kilometers per hour. The vehicle's weight was significantly contributed by large lead-acid batteries, and their range was limited. The car could travel for about an hour on a single charge. The self-propelled vehicle, named Loner Porsche, had 2 electric motors with a power of 2.5 horsepower each. There was no mechanical transmission. The electric motors were located in the hubs of the front wheels. It was the first front-wheel drive electric car. Additionally, the car wasn't purely electric. It had a small gasoline engine driving a generator. The generator produced electricity, which charged the batteries, and they, in turn, powered the electric motors. Thus, it was the first demonstration of a hybrid powertrain, consisting of an internal combustion engine, batteries, and electric motors. Thanks to this project, Porsche was appointed as the chief designer of the company, and, mind you, he was only 24 years old. Later, at the beginning of the last century, he received the Grand Prix at the World Exhibition in Paris for his invention. Moreover, he gained recognition from many well-known engineers and designers of that time. It is believed that from this moment, Porsche actively began developing various modes of transportation. After graduating from the university and receiving an engineering education, Porsche immersed himself in the automotive industry. In 1906, he became the technical director and chief designer of the Viennese firm producing cars under the name Astra Daimler. Under his guidance, models like Prinz Heinrich, Sascha, ADM, and ADR were created. Porsche increasingly thought about making cars accessible to everyone, even those with modest or average incomes. He wanted his creation to be appreciated by ordinary people like himself, and in his vision, the car should be a true family means of transportation, not a toy for wealthy idlers. Rumor has it that at this moment, in his personal notebook, Porsche wrote a page with the title Sketches of a People's Car. During this same period of his life, Porsche got involved in racing. By the way, on one of the races, his Austro-Daimler cars took all the top positions. Porsche himself even piloted his creation, but as they say, life is not just about racing, there was also a personal life. So, during this time, he met a girl named Aloysia Johanna Kays and soon asked her to marry him. She agreed and became not only Ferdinand's beautiful wife, but also the mother of their 2 children, a girl named Louise and a boy named Ferry. Later, Ferry would also become an automotive designer, surpassing even his father's achievements, but let's take things step by step. Ferdinand Porsche was married only once, but Aloysia never got to witness all the successes of her husband and son. She passed away in 1920, and after that, Ferdinand dedicated himself entirely to his work and beloved children. After the death of their mother, Louise became the guardian of the family hearth. While she didn't become a great designer like her father, she made a favorable match by marrying lawyer Anton Peach. This marriage marked the beginning of a new era in the family business. It's also worth mentioning the First World War. Germany actively participated in it, and Ferdinand Porsche was heavily involved in the development of military technology, hybrid power systems for vehicles, engines for dirigibles, and airplanes. One of Porsche's outstanding achievements during this time was the creation of a tractor for a large arming mortar with a caliber of 30.5 centimeters. For his significant contribution to the development of military technology, despite lacking a formal education, Porsche was awarded the title of honorary professor of the Vienna Technical University and even received a medal from the Kaiser for his services. It was also because of this that in the late 1920s, Ferdinand, his son Ferry, and his daughter's spouse, Anton, found themselves in a French prison accused of aiding the German army. Louise became their savior, tirelessly knocking on the doors of various government offices day and night to secure the release of all the men. She attended meetings with French authorities, attempting to justify the actions of her father and brother, and eventually succeeded. After their release in 1926, Ferdinand took on the role of chief engineer at Daimler-Benz in Stuttgart, as featured in a video on our channel. The most famous Mercedes models created under Porsche's guidance were the sporty S-classes. And the first offspring of Porsche in his role as chief designer at Daimler-Benz was the Mercedes 360. This sports car gained immense popularity not only among wealthy Germans, but also among true enthusiasts of elite technology. By the way, it earned Porsche a doctoral degree. However, all this was just his job. He didn't have his own business and was a simple employee, albeit highly paid and respected, but the key word was an employee. Ferdinand realized that he had to dedicate his life to his own business, and when he was already 55 years old, he left Daimler for independent endeavors. One of Ferdinand Porsche's main life principles was a simple formula: honest and diligent work will always yield results. At that time, the automotive market was dominated by speedy Ford cars, but the post-war period became a time of prolonged stagnation in all areas. Moreover, who in impoverished Europe would buy a car for $1,500? Porsche disliked Ford cars. They seemed too simple and even primitive to him, yet complicated in handling. Even the people's car from the DKW company didn't satisfy Ferdinand. It all started when he looked around and, not finding the car of his dreams, decided to design it himself. Porsche wanted something different. His car had to be modern, fast, and reliable, something that wouldn't become outdated even after 20 years. At the same time, it had to be affordable and entirely new, meaning designed from scratch. Quite ambitious demands, many would say. But, consulting with his son, Ferdinand decided to take the step that, according to many experts, he should have taken about 10 years earlier. On April 25, 1931, in Stuttgart, a large two-story building became the headquarters of Ferdinand Porsche's independent design bureau. The first order the bureau received was from the Wanderer Company. They needed a high-speed car with a 2-liter engine. The task had a few months' deadline, but naturally, Porsche successfully completed the job. Next came an order from Auto Union for the first series of record-setting racing cars. By the way, Auto Union was a company that united Audi, DKW, Porsche, and Wanderer. With this merger, the companies intended to join forces in competitive rivalry, primarily against Daimler-Benz. But since Porsche was already working for himself, he was, in fact, working against his longtime employer, to whom he had devoted the best years of his life. Overall, the business was thriving, and Ferdinand's reputation surpassed even his own, but what happened in 1932 threw everything off track. One day, the Porsche Bureau received a letter from the Soviet embassy in Berlin inviting him to visit the Soviet Union. Taking this as a sign of respect, Ferdinand Porsche embarked on a significant journey to Russia. After touring several cities, Ferdinand was disappointed by the absence of a design school in the USSR. The final destination of his journey was Moscow, where he personally met Joseph Stalin, who offered Ferdinand the position of chief car designer of the USSR with the rank of minister. However, not wanting to play politics, Ferdinand declined. It's worth mentioning that the trip to Russia was inspiring for him. Upon returning home, he not only invented a new type of suspension that solved the problem of the smooth ride of military vehicles, but also designed 2 cars that would later become prototypes of the famous Beetle. In 1932, the Nazis came to power in the country, led by Adolf Hitler, who, incidentally, shared Ferdinand Porsche's passion for automobiles. Porsche, in turn, shared Hitler's political views. While Porsche was not a member of the Nazi Party, he actively embraced their ideas. Firstly, Hitler promoted the construction of new roads, and secondly, he significantly simplified the procedure for obtaining driver's licenses. Essentially, Hitler presented a challenging task to German industrialists to create a people's car within a tight deadline that could transport 4 people at a speed of at least 80 kilometers per hour, consume 5 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers, and cost no more than 1,000 marks. In essence, they needed a car that ordinary Germans could afford, and yet with very high performance. An interesting side note in Hitler's history, isn't it? After this, Ferdinand Porsche submitted an application for his project of the people's car and, as a result, won. Collaborating with his son, Ferdinand created drawings for the future Volkswagen car and shared his developments with Hitler. Literally a few days later, he declared from all platforms, the German people, represented by an ordinary worker, will not walk to work or get there on whatever is available. They will go there in a people's car that every resident of Germany can afford. The first people's car, by the way, was built with the contributions of ordinary citizens according to the program developed by the National Socialists. Every week, a worker voluntarily contributed 5 marks to a special account. After almost 4 years, he accumulated 990 marks, enough to purchase a KDF car. This idea was supported by 300,000 people, but the bright future never materialized. The reason for this was the Second World War. All the funds collected by that time went to benefit the Third Reich. Interestingly, after the war, the deceived depositors remembered Volkswagen's obligations to them and demanded their accumulated 990 marks or a car. However, the demands were never heard. All Ferdinand Porsche could do for his depositors was to offer a small discount when buying their new cars. During the war, Porsche demonstrated his best qualities. When there was a shortage of electricity, he invented a way to generate it from windmills. He also actively worked on creating military technology. Nevertheless, this time Ferdinand faced failure, as if God himself was no longer blessing the man to create weapons of killing. In 1945, Porsche, along with his son Ferdy, found themselves in prison again. The men were accused not only of collaborating with the fascist leadership but also of exploiting prisoners of war for personal purposes. Ferdy, Porsche's son, regained freedom after almost a year. He celebrated his release by creating a racing car for the Italian company Cisitalia. The money raised, approximately 1 million francs, was handed over to the French authorities as ransom for his father's freedom. By the way, even while behind bars, Porsche Sr. did not lose his spirit and continued working on the designs for future cars. Some even believe that during his imprisonment, the designer actively collaborated with the Renault company, contributing to the creation of the 4CV model. However, prison was no vacation, and it seriously impacted the health of the designer. Some biographers argue that the French authorities tried to literally break Ferdinand in prison, denying him access to doctors. There's also an opinion that cooperation between Ferdinand and French automotive companies was beneficial for them. Releasing him meant allowing the German automotive industry to stand on its feet again. In general, France had nothing to gain from competitors, and the man who was once applauded by the world and all of France was now sitting in a dirty and cold cell, fading away before everyone's eyes. Only in this deteriorated state, doctors were finally allowed to see Ferdinand, but it was already too late to help him. In total, the designer spent 22 months in prison, and on November 19, 1950, Ferdinand Porsche suffered a severe stroke, and he passed away 2 months later. Nevertheless, before his death, he managed to add a few happy moments to his rather bitter life. One of his cherished wishes came true. The Beetle was launched into mass production, and together with his son, they built the Model 356, the first serial car of the new great company named Porsche. After Ferdinand Porsche's death, the leadership of the company passed into the hands of his children and grandchildren. His son, Ferdinand Porsche Jr., made a significant contribution to the further development of the company. In 1950, he brought the company back to its founding city, Stuttgart. Under his leadership, important decisions were immediately made for the company. Firstly, Porsche abandoned the old technological norms and replaced outdated materials for body panels. Secondly, the company stopped using engines supplied by the Volkswagen Group, actively developing its own engines. In 1951, the company positioned itself as the best producer of racing cars. The reason for this was the new Porsche 550 Spider model. Its main distinguishing features were the soft streamlined roof and a direct front windshield. This model became so popular among car enthusiasts that other companies actively aimed to compete with Porsche cars. On the one hand, it was already a success, but on the other hand, Ferdinand Jr. faced a challenging task. He was expected to create another masterpiece that would surpass the previous one. He had to work even harder. It was in 1963, at the Frankfurt Motor Show, that a new legend appeared, the Porsche 911 with a 2-liter engine producing a whopping 130 horsepower, along with a 5-speed manual gearbox. At that time, it was difficult to predict that this model would become a legend because, despite excellent characteristics, its main drawback was its high price. To make the car more affordable and marketable, Ferdinand employed a clever move. Soon, the Model 912 with 4 cylinders was introduced, and a little later, enthusiasts were offered the 914 version, created with the efforts of German colleagues from Volkswagen. But even with all the difficulties at the start, the model became a sales leader in just a few weeks. Thus, the era of Porsche as a purely family enterprise ended in 1972 when the brand went public. After restructuring, one of Ferdinand Porsche's grandsons, Ferdinand Porsche, moved to Audi and later to Volkswagen, where he eventually became the CEO of the conglomerate. The leadership of the company passed to Ernst Fuhrmann in 1972, who immediately took the 911 model out of production, replacing it with the 928 with a V8 engine and rear-wheel drive. However, after a short period, it became clear that the 911 was much more in demand than the 928. Due to this, Fuhrmann lost his leadership position and Peter Schütz took over. With the arrival of the new executive, the company experienced a return to the Porsche 911. He actively modified existing models and worked on the design of new ones. In March 1977, the 8-cylinder Porsche 928 with 240 horsepower appeared, becoming the car of the year in Europe in 1978. In 1979, the upgraded Porsche 928S with a 300 horsepower engine was released. The advantage of the latter model was that the car could reach a speed of 250 kilometers per hour. In 1982, the company released the Carrera model with a powerful 231 horsepower engine. In 1983, the Porsche Tag V6 engine became the most successful German Formula One racing engine. In 1985, the supercar Porsche 959 was introduced, created based on the 911. It was produced in a limited edition of 292 units. It was the fastest car of its time approved for use on public roads. The 90s were characterized by close collaboration between the brand and the Japanese brand Toyota. As a result of fruitful cooperation, the concept of hybrid production was raised. Porsche also received assistance in developing hybrids. This led to the release of an updated version of the 911 with a more powerful engine, a convertible top, and hydro drive. However, despite such a lineup, in the mid-90s, the company faced losses. The reason for this was ineffective management. To improve the company's situation, Wendelin Wiedeking was appointed as the new CEO. Under the leadership of the new director, the Porsche 993 model was developed. After a successful presentation, models such as the Porsche 928 and Porsche 968 were discontinued. In 1996, another unusual innovation entered the market, the Porsche Boxster, becoming the new face of the brand. Its design, by Harm Legay, drew inspiration from the company's early cars, the open-top Porsche 550 Spyder and Porsche 356 Speedster. The most unusual car in the brand's history was introduced in 2002. It was the Porsche Cayenne, a sports utility vehicle developed in collaboration with Volkswagen and largely similar to the Volkswagen Touareg. To produce it, the company built a new factory in Leipzig, and production began the following year. The Porsche Cayenne immediately became the brand's most sought-after product, although the reaction to its controversial design and the existence of such a vehicle was mixed. By the way, since then, exactly half of the sales and the main profit came from the Cayenne, which was later updated in 2008. But the Cayenne became not only the brand's bestseller due to its reliable suspension, good handling, and excellent off-road characteristics, but also the reason for the appearance of its younger brother, the compact crossover Mekong, introduced in 2013 at the Los Angeles Auto Show. In addition to updating and expanding existing vehicle lines, the company's main efforts since then have been practically focused on one goal: preparing for the release of the four-door Porsche Panamera, officially presented in April 2009 at the Shanghai Auto Show. The second generation of the Panamera was introduced in 2016 and significantly differed from the previous generation. In 2017, the company celebrated its major victory. On May 11, 2017, in Zuffenhausen, the 1 millionth unit of the 911 model rolled off the assembly line. Of course, we cannot overlook the history of creating the company's logo. If the brand name is clear, then the unique emblem was developed in 1950, personally by Porsche, his son, and a small circle of trusted individuals. Originally, the plan was for the sketch to convey a story about the car's homeland. The emblem was based on the coat of arms of Württemberg. It consisted of a chess arrangement of deer antlers and black-red stripes. The yellow background, as well as the key elements, were decided to be left unchanged. The color scheme largely resembled fire, strong and unstoppable, just like Porsche cars. In the center of the logo composition, it was decided to place a prancing black horse, symbolizing forward momentum and the pursuit of perfection. Now, Porsche production cooperates significantly with the Volkswagen Group, working side by side to improve cars. Indeed, there's nothing surprising about it. After all, 51% of the company's shares belong to Porsche Automobile Holding SE. Since December 2009, 49% of the shares belong to Volkswagen AG. Today, Porsche is a public company, and some of its shares are traded on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. However, even almost 80 years later, the Porsche family remains significant shareholders. The company's revenue for the 2010 financial year was almost 8 billion euros, setting an absolute record in its history. During the same reporting period, 81,850 cars were sold and 89,000 were produced. The history of the Porsche company is another proof that the more a person is passionate about their work, the more they can achieve. It is believed that thanks to Ferdinand Porsche, German cars gained their high reputation, primarily as the most reliable, durable, and prestigious. Well, the words once said by Ferdinand are still known to each of us: if you want to do something well, do it yourself. Friends, how do you personally feel about this car brand, and have you had any experience driving a Porsche? Be sure to share your opinion in the comments. Also, rate the video if you liked it. See you soon.